What's up, everybody? What's up? Welcome back. Welcome back. We are here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice. This time for the Thanksgiving three-game slate on Thursday. Six teams in action, Week 12. One of the best DFS slates of the year. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined by architect of our lineup builder at Occupy Fantasy, owner of dfsMagic, and notorious short slate crusher, Jack. Jack, it is a yearly tradition to do these videos with you. It is a pleasure. How are you?
Great, man. Always my favorite holiday. I think it was anyway. And then we started doing this. So, eat some food, win some money, and to go home, right? So, yeah, I think as we talked about, this is an extra nice slate, I think. We'll just say it up front before we can get into it. No Josh Allen on a short slate automatically makes it a better video and a better time tomorrow.
Absolutely. And nothing against Bills fans or Josh Allen. It's just when we have those stud quarterbacks that can run, it makes shorter slates much more difficult to execute the strategies that we like to deploy. But, Jack, I don't even know if we can really say that anymore since you won 58K with Josh Allen on the last short slate you played. So,
It's true. We do know how to win with those guys, but you're right. We have to change up the strategy a little bit and compete with more lineups for sure.
absolutely. So I see we already got people in the chat. Double J, Drew, Matt, the Douche. What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. This is a live Q&A, so we'll be here for 45 minutes or so. Jack, I know you got some NHL business to attend to. Which, by the way, congrats so far. I know it's only been a month into the season, but you've been crushing it, and I'm just fingers crossed for you, so you can get one of those live final tickets.
Thanks, man. And I'd say credit to you. Definitely learned a lot from you in the off season on just process and grinding and trying to apply that to NHL. So for all of you out there, listen to Brian and read what he writes. He's got strategies down for this stuff that apply to every sport, not just the stuff that he focuses on. So thanks to you as well.
Absolutely. So, all right, what we're going to do in this video, we will talk about, like we do on normal Monday and Thursday videos, injuries that impact the slate, some recent usage notes. We'll go position by position, team by team on how we plan to attack this slate. Of course, we'll cover short slate strategy. And we'll talk about that from a high level, just in general, how you should approach these types of slates. And then we'll get slate specific for this individual slate because, as Jack said, it is extra good. If you guys have questions throughout the show, throw them in the chat box. If you're watching this live, we will answer them as we proceed through the show. If you're watching this after the fact, if you're watching it probably Wednesday night, maybe Thursday morning, you can comment on the video and I'll get back to you. The best way, once the video is published, though, for these live streams is to join our Discord server, happily to chat it up with you in there. And Jack, I don't have the screenshots handy this time, but we do have a lot of new subscribers that have joined the channel since the last time you have been on. So I'll just give a quick rundown. Jack has won a 2-game slate, a 3-game slate, and a 4-game slate for a combined over $100,000. So he's got the short slate strategy down pat. And Jack, I feel like we need a win for you NFL because after the Will Lutz debacle, after the MVS drop pass, you're due for some positive variance on these shorter slates.
Yeah, all right, I will complain to everyone. Just okay. So the what game was that 2 weeks ago? Why am I blanking? The field goal.
The Denver game.
Buffalo.
Yeah, Buffalo, Denver.
Yeah, Denver. I was in first in FanDuel showdown, one shop, so it was like 65K. I needed the kick to miss, and it missed. And then there was a penalty, and we all knew it was going to go in the second time. So,
Yes.
yeah, we're getting close with these strategies, man, and I think we're due here. So let's make it happen.
All right, so let's go injuries first. And again, if you guys have questions, let us know. But we'll start with the first game, 12:30. The second game is 4:30. The final game is 8:20. All these are times Eastern time zone. So Jack, the most impactful injury situation is for Green Bay. You and I were talking right before the show that this opens up a lot for the entire slate. Quick rundown. Aaron Jones hurt his knee. He's going to be out. Backup running back Emmanuel Wilson has been placed on injured reserve. Reserve rotational wide receiver Dontavian Wicks is going to be out. And while a wide receiver 4 may not be that impactful on most teams, he's been running 15 plus routes for the past couple of games, and the team really likes him. He's been taking some looks away from guys like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. Jaden Reed's questionable, but I think he is going to play. And then their top 2 tight ends, Josiah DeGuara and Luke Musgrave, are also out. So, Jack, this means we have super cheap A.J. Dillon. Let me pull it up on my side on the DraftKings here. Super cheap A.J. Dillon at 5,400 on DK. We have I think now all of the receivers are a tiny bit underpriced on DraftKings without Dontavian Wicks. And then we have who will be their starting tight end, Tucker Kraft, at $2,500. And they're just as cheap on FanDuel. This is a spot that I think we can take advantage of. And it's not a secret by any means, but what we can do with the Green Bay guys, I think opens up a lot.
Yep, absolutely. And I think another important point, we were talking about before the video here is, you know, are we going to be able to take advantage of these players? Like, is this team actually going to throw the ball forward and not just, kind of run the ball, give up, throw checkdowns? And we've clearly seen Green Bay, as a Packer fan, they get down a lot and then they start airing it out to try to come back. And they're probably going to be struggling to stop Detroit, right? So you got to imagine they'll be trailing and they'll be throwing. So yeah, I think a lot of opportunity for these guys. And do you see their ownership going up very high or not so much?
Let's see. So you have FanDuel ownership on your side. I'll tell the people what this looking like for DraftKings. And just for DraftKings, we have Jordan Love at 6% projected. AJ Dillon is going to get the most at 45%. But we have every other player under 20% projected ownership for them, which is crazy to me. It's the pricing is a little soft just across the board, not necessarily just for Green Bay, but as touchdown or so underdogs, excuse me, people aren't rushing to jam them in. And maybe we'll tweak this here throughout the next 12 hours or so. But there's enough value elsewhere that you don't necessarily have to play the Green Bay guys, and I think that's why ownership isn't going to follow. I'm a big fan of this, and as I was telling you right before the show, a Green Bay mega stack and playing studs in other positions is ultra appealing, not only in the largest contest, but honestly in small field too.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I guess for folks that are new, we always like to talk about on these short slates. There's usually a few guys, a handful of guys that just get, you know, mega ownership, like 40, 50, 60. I think we saw McCaffrey or someone get like 70% ownership on a two gamer before.
Nick Chubb earlier in the year,
And
remember? Nick Chubb
yes,
had got like
Chubb,
70 or
he got
80%.
hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the dynamic is that um, players are going to get that owned whether they're deserving of it or not. So in some cases, you have pretty garbage players that are getting like 60% ownership, and it's a very easy decision to say, I'm going to pivot. That guy's not that good, not a great spot. But on this slate, Brian, we actually have some really elite guys that are probably worthy of those ownerships, right? The guys that you mentioned, St. Brown, McCaffrey, um, Lamb, Pollard. So does that strengthen your confidence in that type of mega stacking approach with those one-offs?
Absolutely. When you have stronger elite plays, and I think we know most of the stacking ownership is going to be on Dallas and San Francisco in particular, it makes even more sense to go with this type of strategy. And I just put this on screen, right? Jordan Love, AJ Dillon, Romeo Dobbs, whichever Green Bay receiver you prefer, and Tucker Kraft leaves you with $6,300 per player for the final five spots. And that's just a four-man stack. Five-man stack is not out of the question either. So something I'd like for sure. Question in the chat from Matt saying, can you play both Detroit running backs? So let's move over to Detroit, the Detroit side of this game. Both of these guys have been producing. Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs splitting work, getting goal line work, getting receiving work. Really just a fantasy gold mine at the position. The one usage note we have to look at here is Jamison Williams finally had a good game. Ran 25 routes for maybe the first time ever, definitely for the first time this year. Resulted in 12.4 fantasy points. We expect him to be somewhat popular at $3,400 on DraftKings. But Jack, to answer Matt's question, do you think you can play both Detroit running backs and maybe just talk about playing two running backs from the same team on a short slate in general?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can. I've got FanDuel up. I do think in this case it's a little tough just because of the pricing. So they're priced up. Gibbs is 82 and Montgomery's 78. So when you look at when you think about it this way, like what running backs are you not playing by doing that? Charbonnet featured role, McCaffrey obviously, Dillon featured role, Pollard featured role, Robinson featured role. So I wouldn't say no. Maybe if you're doing your mega stack idea, right, you might run it back with both running backs. But I think what does the DraftKings dynamic look like? I think it's a little tough on FanDuel for me to get there.
Yeah, FanDuel does make it tougher. On DraftKings, it's easier to digest with Gibbs 6,800 and Montgomery 6,300. So quite a bit of salary savings in comparison to FanDuel. I think, well, I mean, I think you can do it, and especially if you're building 150 lineups, 20 lineups, I wouldn't rule that out by any means. Would I jam that in hand building? Probably not. But just to his point, Jack, playing two running backs from the same team historically has been a profitable strategy because the field doesn't do it nearly as often as they probably should.
Yeah, so I definitely would. I would like. I'm with you. I wouldn't block it, but I probably wouldn't go out of my way to like click it into my first couple lineups either.
Fair.
Those two in particular. Any or on that subject, any other double RB situations? I'm not sure.
I don't
Um,
think so. Maybe Dallas if Rico Dowdle's in. He's very questionable, by the way, which would open up more work for Pollard as we transition to the Dallas Washington game. Maybe and as 7 point dogs, and mostly they've been cannibalistic. If one guy gets more work, the other doesn't, and that's Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. I think I think Detroit is easily the best spot to do it in because we don't really have, like you said, most of these other guys are in featured roles, which is rare to have so many featured guys at a typically thin position on a short slate.
Yeah, I guess one other note on Detroit running backs, at least on FanDuel, we have their ownership pretty low, and I think that's because they're expensive. And it's like, why would you pay 8,200 for a guy splitting carries when you can pay 5,800 for
Right.
Zach Charbonnet who can get all the work? But if you think about it, Zach Charbonnet could get game scripted out, or they can't run the ball, he catches 4 passes for 30 yards, whereas the lines might put up 49 points, and there
Right.
might be plenty of touchdowns going on. So I think from an ownership perspective, looking to play the Detroit running backs is a great move. I mean, they're a heavy favorite against a really bad run defense. They shouldn't be that low owned, but it's just a pricing thing. So that may be another reason why you don't have to get cute with playing two. Is even just playing one is already should be good leverage.
We have both sub 20% on DraftKings as well. I wouldn't be shocked if either one got above 20%, but I think it is that dynamic that there are so many other bell cow running backs that you don't have to play a guy who's splitting work. But Jack, you've been a Green Bay fan for some time. You know how their run defense has been historically. So a really good matchup
Every
for
year,
the.
man. Every year, it's just. And the field's going to want to click in McCaffrey, and they're going to say, "Oh crap, I have to save salary," and they're going to see these cheap
Yes.
dudes that are getting featured roles. I mean, so yeah. Let's touch on a related note. Backup running backs. They have. If you would have just jammed backup running backs the last few of these slates, you would have made a bunch of money, and left salary on the table. Thoughts on this slate with backup running backs? Kind of the min price guys that probably won't get many touches, but if a chalk guy fails, maybe there's some chaos.
All right. So position by or team by team, Detroit, we have two starter level guys. Green Bay. So again, Aaron Jones is out. Emmanuel Wilson is out. Let me just pull up their running backs here. They signed James Robinson to the active roster. Patrick Taylor is their number two running back, who they never seemingly liked. They let him go, and I think they signed him off someone else's practice squad this week. So he knows the system. It's not like some random guy off the street coming in. But Dylan has been a letdown sometimes when he's been the lead guy. Taylor could get work in a negative game script here. So I could see Taylor being the guy, but he is 4,200 randomly. I don't know why. Washington, let's monitor. Antonio Gibson is questionable. He's not really a min price guy. He's $4,500. Dallas would be an interesting spot, especially if Rico Dowdle misses. We're recording this live at 4:30. I haven't checked the transactions just yet. If they call up Malik Davis from the practice squad, that would indicate Dowdle was out, and they're not going to give Pollard 40 touches, right? They would give Malik Davis some touches as well. He's one guy I would be super interested in if he is activated and Dowdle is out. And then the other situation is San Francisco. But who do you trust, Mason or Mitchell? That's a big coin flip. If McCaffrey goes down, they're up by 30, whatever it may be. And then Seattle, they have DJ Dallas and Kenny McIntosh with Kenneth Walker likely out. So I think this is one of the tougher slates to play a backup running back if you're building 20 or 150 lineups.
Yeah, I agree. It's tougher. I think I'm still going to find some. And let me just, for folks wondering out there, like, why would you play these guys, right? Say none of the running backs smash, but you have like CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown and, DK Metcalf all just go nuts. There's not going to be a lot of lineups that have all three of those because most lineups are going to have expensive running backs. So the way those win is you have all three and you have some crappy running back who scores 3 points, but he's 0.5% owned. And sometimes we've seen the injuries happen and those guys will score touchdowns. So not something to go crazy with, but if you're looking for that 20 150 lineups, It is something to consider, and it has been profitable on these slates.
Yeah, and if you're making 20 lineups, maybe just pick the spot that you like the most and play 5 to 10%. If you're building 150, you can mix a few more guys in because it is, excuse me, it is a very low probability spot, but a very high upside spot if it does indeed hit. So, all right, Washington and Dallas. Mentioned the injuries already. If you're looking at snaps from last week, Curtis Samuel was ejected early, so they had a really weird wide receiver rotation. So I would ignore that for the most part. Gibson questionable. We'll find out for sure if he's going to play probably later this afternoon. Uh, when he was out last week, Brian Robinson just an elite workload. I want to say 63 of 81 snaps or something crazy. Ran like 35 routes. Just an insane workload. So gotta like Brian Robinson if Gibson's out. If Gibson's in, he'll probably steal some more of that work. And on Dallas' side, Dowdle is questionable at running back. I already talked about the Malik Davis situation. The rest of the team is pretty healthy. Any thoughts on the running back situations or any other injury? Because there's really none for this middle game.
No, I mean, Gibson has been the pass catcher, right, when he's been in. So what's his price? 54. Yeah, I mean, he seems like a guy that will be like 3% owned if he plays.
Yes.
I would have interest there. You know, it's not a total trash backup if he plays. He might get 30% of the snaps. But yeah, other than that, nothing crazy on the injury front here. What do we think the field's going to do with Dallas? We got most expensive quarterback, most expensive receiver, definitely a smash spot. What do you think?
Yeah, they're going to be on it. I think Dallas and San Francisco are the obvious spots that people are going to pick. But as we'll talk about here in the next section about mega stacking and game stacking on these slates, I don't think the field, due to the pricing, is going to four-man stack Dallas nor San Francisco. So that's where we could get our edges, either fading them or mega stacking them. But it does get difficult quickly on both sites with the pricing.
Yeah, and to that end, you gotta dip down. I mean, do you think the field's gonna the other way we get unique, with those hockey teams is bringbacks. So do you think? Let's check Washington here. Do we think the field's gonna have a lot of interest in Washington? Judging by our ownership here, not a ton. Robinson probably gets some, right? What about these receivers? McLaurin hasn't. I think the up wide receiver, underperforming wide receiver, has been on him for what
Last few
half
weeks.
the year.
Yeah, at least.
Is it time? Is it time this week?
It's got to be, dude. It's got to be on a short slate. Why not? Why not cash in on it? We got McLaurin. Let's pull it up here. Projected ownership right now: McLaurin 21%, Dotson 4%, Curtis Samuel 4%. Both those guys are under 5K. The last two guys in particular. Yeah, man. I think even if you do stack Dallas, I don't think many people are bringing back two Washington players, which we know is generally the optimal approach on a three-game slate. Dude, how many people are going to play Dak, CD, third Dallas offensive player plus Dallas defense, 4-0 Dallas stacks on FanDuel?
Oh yeah, I mean that's probably more popular than bringbacks for sure, right?
Yes, for sure.
It's just inevitable. Do you think you can apply your Green Bay strategy with Washington?
Yes,
Mega
dude.
stack.
Yes, we saw them literally throw like 60 times in a row one game this season. One of the few teams in the entire league whose pass rate is above expectation is positive. So, to that note, playing something like, and I'm just putting this on the screen, Howe, Robinson, McLaurin, Samuel, Logan Thomas. That is five guys. This is one. This is large field only. Running back with CeeDee Lamb or Pollard, whoever you want to, right? 5,500 left per player for the final three spots. And this may seem crazy to allocate this many roster spots to one game. But Jack, as we'll talk again, we'll talk about it here in a second with this the strategy. If this game explodes and the other two fail, and in this era of the NFL, so many games fail anyways. If you can somehow get a game that scores 10, 20 more points than the other game, this is going to be even more profitable than it was 3-4 years ago on these short slates.
Yep. And what is Vegas? Vegas tells us, at least the one I'm looking at, this total is quite a bit on the rise. Does that sound right to you?
Mm-hmm.
So we're up to 48.5, which, like you said, this year there's a lot of bad games. So I think don't take that lightly on a short slate. And then the other thing is predictable target share, right? We know where the ball is going with these guys. It's going to McLaurin. It's going to Jahan Dotson. Samuel, what are your thoughts on Samuel? I can't figure this out. Was he coming back from injury last week? Is that why he didn't play
Oh,
too much?
maybe you missed out of saying he got ejected immediately somehow. I don't
Oh,
know
I'm
what.
sorry, I missed that. Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
good.
I was reading salaries. Okay, so he'll be back, right? So the ball's going to those three guys.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think taking Brian's strategy and applying it to Washington is equally good. We know these guys are going to throw the ball. Any other Washington notes or Dallas for that
I will
matter?
say if you're looking for like trash guys, if Washington is getting blown out and they're still throwing, or if Samuel gets ejected or one of these guys get hurt, they have been known to play Brian Pringle and Jameson Crowder a decent amount. And those guys are going to be 1% owned maybe. They're both 3K and 3,200 respectively on DraftKings. These are the types of guys for 150 max contests that really differentiate and save salary on a mega game stack.
Yeah. And I interest you in minimum price Luke Schoonmaker
Yes.
for MME builds. Yes. All right. So I think this interesting point. A lot of times in these short slates, you have just bad tight ends, right? And the field just punts. We have some big names on here, right? Kittle and Laporta are the obvious ones. Logan Thomas is just cheap, and he's gonna get ownership. Ferguson will get ownership, and obviously Kraft. The field's not gonna fall asleep. They're gonna know Tucker Kraft is starting, and he's cheap, so he's gonna be super owned.
Yeah.
At least he'll get 10, 20%. But Schoonmaker plays, right, 30, 40%. That's a great way to get different with a Dallas stack. Is no one's gonna do that. If he catches a touchdown, he's almost a lock to be optimal, probably.
I would think so too. That's a really good way to look at it. And that actually brings up someone's question in the chat. It is from the Deuce. What's up, man? Who is a member of the channel, by the way, active in our Discord. Make sure you guys are in our Discord. Make sure you're a member here on YouTube if you're not a member of the site already. But he says, what do you guys think about double tight end? In general, I think it's okay to allow on shorter slates. It's not necessarily we're not going to condemn it like we do on main slates. But Jack, I think even more so on this slate when you have Kittle, Laporta, Ferguson, Kraft, Logan Thomas, all very viable guys. To me, it actually makes sense to double tight end, not necessarily force it, but allow it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it just kind of comes down to how chalky is the rest of your lineup, right? Like if you're playing like your idea of a Green Bay mega stack or a Washington mega stack, like you're already different. You don't need to get crazy. But like if you're doing what I said, if you're playing like a DAC stack and you have McCaffrey in there or something, right? And you're looking for a salary saver that's low owned, like it's a reasonable play.
For sure. Let me see here. What else we got? Anything else in the chat? A few more questions. We'll get to those. Let's talk about this final game. San Francisco, no major injuries on their side. They're fully loaded. Seattle, DK Metcalf is questionable. Mispractice on Tuesday with a toe injury. We did not catch Pete Carroll's press conference right before we went live, so we'll check that after the show. I imagine Metcalf's going to play. The dude like never practices. Neither he nor Tyler Lockett practice very much. Still end up playing. Kenneth Walker is indeed going to be out more than likely. Zach Charbonnet, massive role. Drafted him a ton in best ball before the season started. Really high draft profile. He's going to get a bulk of the workload. And Geno Smith, officially questionable. He sounds like he's trending better and better. $5,600 will probably go overlooked in this matchup. If he is somehow out, we have a very competent backup in Drew Lock at 5K. I imagine he might pull a little more ownership due to his price. But Jack, Seattle's another spot. If we can get one injury, and I don't think we will, but maybe we have enough with the running back situation. But what are your thoughts on Seattle? We like Green Bay as a viable underdog. We like Washington as a viable underdog in stacks. Can we do it with Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can. I'm looking at, FanDuel pricing. He is 6,600, and somehow Jordan Love is 7,200. And as a Packer fan, like I don't understand that one. But the point is, very cheap, and you know where the ball's going, right? You know which receivers it's going to. So I think he's someone that is not going to get a lot of ownership. And by the way, I was scanning the notes, the news. We do have some updates. So Gino, Pete said he expects him to play. DK removed from injury report, so he's in.
Cool.
Walker doubtful. Lockett also removed from injury report. So I think we have our certainty there.
Cool.
Yeah, man, I'm good with playing Gino. I guess my question to you would be, is he someone you have to four stack, or do you think you can get away with a 3-man stack with Seattle.
Dude, you know I'm a sucker for all the rules and all the research we do, and we know 4-man plus stacks win so much more frequently than they're played. I would still probably force it, but it gets difficult for San Francisco and Seattle because they don't have many secondary players outside of their studs that get the ball much. You think San Francisco, Juwan Jennings, short 18 routes last week, not getting the ball a ton when you have Ayuk and Debo and Kittle and McCaffrey. Seattle, they do have JSN, the rookie receiver. That certainly opens up more than they had been in the past. And I think you can play him with Zach Charbonnet, who ran a ton of routes. Charbonnet, by the way, had already taken over the 2-minute drill and the long down and distance work before Walker got hurt. Now with Walker hurt, he obviously retained that role and got the early down work. So just again, just a massive workload for Zach Charbonnet. So I think something like Geno, Charbonnet, one to two of the receivers, two of the three receivers that you want to pick. I think you have to do it if you're gonna play it. Again, I don't think many people are gonna stack Seattle, but if they do, it's gonna be 3-man, and you're gonna be competing against those people.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think Charbonnet opens it up for sure. I think you probably don't want to play like, I mean, I think you'd have to be, it's really risky to play like all three Seattle receivers, right? But if you
Yes.
play Charbonnet, you could play at least one of Metcalf or Lockett. You could play both, or you could play um, one. It's kind of a hold your nose play, right? But Noah Fant, it can run, and he's on the field a lot. He does not get the ball very much, but Hufanga's out, right? For 49ers, they are pass funnel. So I guess my only, I don't have any data to back this up, Brian, but I always feel like the divisional games are less likely to just go nuts with scoring. So that's my only other hesitation. I'm sure since I say that, it's gonna be like 40-30, but and I do see this is the lowest total and it's dropping. So I guess I do have a little bit of data on my side here. But I mean, do you have any thoughts on of the three games? Like, where does this one rank for you in terms of game stack environment?
It's certainly last. It's definitely the last of the three. But it's funny because I actually went back and watched our video that we did for this slate last year, just to see if I missed any strategy or just to catch, think of some nuggets. And the consensus by the field and even by us was that the final game on that slate, Minnesota and New England, was by far the worst game to stack. You and I were like, it's gross, so we're going to do it, and it ended up putting up the most points on the slate, right? So weird things can happen when there are only a handful of games to choose from. Dallas blows
Yeah.
out, Detroit blows out. I mean, again, we've seen it so many times where games have scored like 35, 40 total points. We've seen it, man. So I think while it is gross and on paper is the worst matchup, that makes it one of the better ones, especially from Seattle's side, because the field won't do it as much.
And of course, I said that and quickly realized all three games are divisional games
Yeah.
on this slate, so that doesn't matter. But yeah, you're right. So we're having our high risk mentality, right? A grosser game means everyone else is going to think that it's going to go around. I guess you mentioned it a little bit with San Francisco. I mean, what's your approach here, right? I mean, we think Purdy is the chalkiest quarterback, especially DraftKings. We know McCaffrey's going to get ownership. Are you leaning towards prioritizing this in small field, just kind of matching field, like going all in on it? What are you thinking on San Francisco? I think that's like the toughest spot for me to try to figure out.
It's super tough. It's really again. I just put in Purdy, McCaffrey, Ayuk, Kittle, 4-man stack, and we'll talk about here in a second why we're including running backs and tight ends in our short slate stacks. But you put those four guys in, that leaves $4,400 left per player. But again, there are cheaper guys that can make this work. I think you have to eat the chalk, especially in smaller contests. And in larger contests, it is scary not to play these guys on a 3-game slate. But it's also difficult to 4-man stack. But because of that, we know the field is not going to do it. So I think you have to force it in larger contests and even smaller contests to get beyond what the field is doing, right? There's, again, like I said earlier, there's two ways to play it. You either overstack the chalk or you fade the chalk here. And I think on short slates, you have to overstack more often than not.
Yep, I agree. And some of those lineups will look gross. But I think it'd be great. Maybe next time we can pull up our little leverage chart we have. But the amount of people that play 2 and 3-man stacks on these slates is just staggering. And
Yes.
the amount of times it wins more than a 4-man stack, but that the field plays it like you're just competing with everyone. So you just gotta. I think maybe for this one's you gotta think about for that to win, what else has to happen in the other games, right? I mean, like playing someone like Tony Pollard would make a lot of sense if he fits. Some like a funnily player that could steal all the points from another game. Defenses from the other games, obviously, right? Actually, on the subject of defense, so we've talked in the past for folks, 2 game slate, kind of wide open, play quarterback against defense, multiple players against defense. 3 gamer. I guess we're kind of transitioning to that strategy set part anyway. But what do you think about quarterback defense matchups on this one?
I think it is probably the best slate possible for it. I maybe I'm wrong here, but okay, Purdy against Seattle, maybe not, but Jordan Love, right, against Detroit. Ideally, we get a couple sacks, pick six. That's possible. Sam Howell is the prototypical quarterback for quarterback versus opposing defense on a short slate. I'm not sure you could find a better cover boy for that argument. The guy takes on pace to take 1,000,000 sacks and also leads the league in passing yards. Did you know this, Jack? The league leaders in rushing yards is Christian McCaffrey. In passing yards is Tyreek Hill. And miraculously, in receiving yards. In passing yards is Sam Howell, which I would not have guessed. But he also
I saw that and I was in disbelief.
yeah, but also leads the league in sacks taken, right? So leads the league in passing yards and sacks taken. You cannot draw up a better Sam Howell versus Dallas defense as a differentiator, but also high upside play.
I almost want to like make a rule that's like Dallas defense in every Sam Howell lineup. Like it's gonna happen. The dude's gonna take 8 sacks and throw the ball 55 times.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, and Love too. I mean, I've seen it watching Packer games. He's terrible. They lose. They get down 28-0, and they start throwing. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think it's a good way. And I think in a 3 gamer, it's a lot more unique than a 2 gamer. I think
Yes.
most people optimizers probably are less likely to go there.
I totally agree. So, I mean, it looks super nice when you do something like that. So, all right, let's talk about this now. Again, if you guys have questions, I haven't seen any specific questions here. There is one question from David. What's up, David? He is playing a 42-man qualifier contest, lots of pros in it. Would you treat this as super high risk? And I think, Jack, even the pros don't optimally game stack. They just jam projections on these types of slates. So I think in that sense, I would game stack as we suggest, and you actually get ahead of the pros that way.
Yeah, I think we both play against those kind of people in small field. I think the biggest tip we could give is just as for when you're trying to figure out ownership, kind of like double or 1.5 times the chalkiest guys, and then everyone else goes really low.
Yep.
And I think something I learned from Brian in these kind of contests is you want to jam in a lot of chalk, and then you want to pick 1, maybe 2 low-owned plays. They don't have to be trash, right? But guys that are, so I think if you're looking at the lineup builder, guys kind of in that sub 20% range, right? At least 1, maybe 2. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to treat it super high risk and get way different. I think you could build a very valid, correlated game stack with some chalk in it, and that would be just fine for that type of contest. I mean, you play small field approach on these kind of 100 man-ish stuff for tomorrow.
I'm gonna 4-2 game stack pretty much everything. Maybe a 5-man if it fits and looks great. But I'm gonna 4-2 basically everything, and you'd be surprised at the amount of leverage you get doing that. You could be chalky and still have high upside, which is a great combination. So let's talk about the 3 core tenets of short slate strategy, Jack, and then we'll see how it applies to this individual slate. It is 4:50. We'll be here for 10 more minutes maybe. So we'll talk about this briefly and then maybe some low-owned plays that we like at each position. So Jack, the 3 ways to get different and or have high upside on these types of slates is leave salary, mega game stack, and am I missing something? I am missing. Oh, low ownership. Ownership. Playing
Yep.
1 to 3 guys below 20% projected ownership. I will say, as we've said a couple times here in the past few minutes, 4 players from one team, including running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, defenses. 2 guys from the other team is the optimal way, especially in small field contests, but large field as well. But while it works less often than other stacks, there is much leverage to be gained by playing 5-man stacks on DraftKings and even 6-man stacks on DraftKings. Again, it doesn't win often, but people do not do it at all. And when a game goes off, you have a chance to really climb up the leaderboard. We've seen 6-man stacks win these small slate GPPs. We've seen 5-man stacks, certainly. So, Jack, of all of those of those three options, which one or all three do you think apply the most to this individual Thanksgiving slate?
Got to be stacking, right? I mean, we
Yes.
talked about it. Two of the three games are tailor-made for game stacking. So yeah, and I think the other thing to consider with the three gamer is you're not nearly as worried about duplicates as you are in a two gamer. You do have to worry about it a little bit, but uh, even in a large field GPP, I don't think you're going to enter a lineup that has like 100 dupes. Maybe there's like a couple, like if you go to like Roto Grinders Optimal or something, maybe that'll have like 100 entries. But um, I think just by game stacking a game, like Brian said, the field doesn't do it. That's kind of already unique enough on these kind of slates. And then I think the other one to me is just the ownership. Like there's some actual football players in the sub 20% range here. And I think that's because, right, we have some pretty cheap guys due to injuries that are getting a lot of ownership. So there are plenty of places to make a pivot to, a reasonable player. Um,
Agree.
what's the last one? Salary. I guess I'm curious what you think. I feel like on this one it's a little thin to leave a bunch of salary. There's a lot of good players on the slate, and it's tough to find a lot of cases where I think a guy that's 3K cheaper can outscore someone. What are your thoughts on the salary here?
Yeah, I'll probably just leave 49K min salary in the builder for DraftKings, 59K on FanDuel. The only reason I'm a little hesitant is because of the running back pricing. Charbonnet's so cheap, AJ Dillon's so cheap, Brian Robinson to an extent is pretty cheap. But I agree. And if something like that does happen and the optimal's like $2,500 left over, I don't think anyone will find it on a three-game slate on this particular slate. So yeah, I think salary you can play it much more normally. Normally we would say maybe leave $400 to $500 on a main slate maximum. Here I think you can probably go to 1,000, or do you think that's too aggressive too?
No, I think that's fine. I'm just looking at. I mean, running back's always the one I look at. So if McCaffrey fails, you the next closest guy is 8,200. So like right there, I think you've got comfortably 1,000 that you could play with. Um,
Sure.
we know defense is random, right? So, and another way you can play this too is you can make in the builder, right? We have these special salary rules where you could put the salary to 49.5 max or 59.5 FanDuel, and then you could set a salary rule. It's like, hey, if I'm using a 1% player, I'll let it go up to the full salary
Yes.
cap, right? And so that way you're not eliminating the possibility of getting those lineups. But if you're entering a lineup that uses all the salary and every player is above 25% ownership, like that'll probably have some duplicates.
For sure. Absolutely. One question I have for you, and I'll chime in as well. I'm surprised no one's asked it just yet, but if you're building 150 lineups, you're building 20 lineups. Think about that in one bucket, and then let's say you're also building small field lineups. I know you have been more aggressive in this area in the past than I have, but how likely are you, whether it's your MME or your small field groups of lineups, to completely X out quarterbacks and stacks and just go all in on a couple versus spreading it out and playing each one or most of them, maybe not equally, but not all in on just a couple.
Yeah, I think I've come to your way of thinking over the years. I have one going all in on a guy, but I think we've come up with enough strategies that we can play all the quarterbacks. We don't have to get lucky and pick the right one, right? We can build better lineups in the field with each of the six quarterbacks. We know what they're going to do. We know where the leverage is. So I think I'm more in that camp now. Um, I guess I'll throw it back to you for small field. Let's say someone out there is building three lineups. How does that change your decision there, or do how do you approach it that way when you can't play all six, for example?
Yeah, I would just go with the three that project the best, whether it's in the builder or your own hand building, your own feeling. Honestly, if you can't find a tiebreaker, whichever game you're able to watch, right? That's just a real thing that people play this for as well. But I think you're playing three. It's like stacking in NHL. It's like stacking in MLB. It's similar to all these stacking sports where generally you want to play your core and then rotate stacks around it for small field. I think it's the same way here, right? You play your core guys, you play a Green Bay stack and or a Detroit stack. And I wouldn't fault you if you only have three lineups to play two of those stacks from the same game, right? You really like Washington, Dallas, for example, or Green Bay, Detroit, and you play two quarterbacks. The more spread out approach, obviously, is playing one stack from each game. I don't think there's really a right answer for it. I would just say whatever feels best for those who are building.
Yep. We got a question about best run back, Washington be trailing. Yeah, I mean, so I think obviously you could build with Dak and bring backs like we said, or you could just play Sam Howell against Cowboys defense
Right.
and
He's the best
some
bring
of the
back in a trailing game script.
yeah, Sam Howell's the best bring back exactly. Uh, and then single game. I haven't looked at single game yet. I was gonna do the ownership tonight. Have you looked at any of these yet?
I admittedly have not. So, but I do think with all the injuries, there are certainly some spots to take advantage of. I just don't have any concrete takes right now. So,
Yeah. Especially people are going to be drinking beers and not. Oh, that brings up a good point. Late swapping.
yes,
This is
yes.
the only slate NFL almost where we get to do intelligent late swapping after every game. So if you're building any amount of lineups, make sure you set your flex to the latest position, and then take a look after each game of where you're at and try to figure out where you are, what the field is doing, if anyone has your lineup, what they might have. And as people don't know, the 58K win was literally like Brian and I showed him my lineup, and we had a conversation about late swapping, and I did late swap and I won. So it literally will win you a lot of money if you do it right. The field doesn't do it, we know that. So um, yeah, late swap, be around, check your lineups.
Let me ask you this, Jack. Do you have, say, 8 more minutes or so, or do you have to rush to get the
Yeah,
NHL stuff
yeah,
done?
I'm good. No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm like a professional now. My NHL stuff's all built. Like I'm good.
All right, that's great. All right, so maybe we have a few more minutes then. Let me ask you this. So obviously, you and I have discussed. We even, if you remember, the Mitch Trubisky swap for the 50K in the playoff slate was another swap discussion that we had. It is so you figure that's 100K in swaps discussions that just Jack has had
Mhm.
alone in 2 slates. But I think there's not necessarily a playbook for because we get this question a lot, right? It's like, what do I look for when I swap? What do you look for? What situations? What players? What roster spots? Ownership? Maybe just a quick rundown of okay, the 12:30 game is ended, or maybe more specifically, the 4:30 p.m. game is ended. You have 30 minutes to make moves to look at lineups. What is your process? What are you looking for? How are you scrolling through lineups? What decisions are you making?
Yeah. So I honestly I think this one's easier to do on your phone than on the computer because you can sort through the scoreboard more easily. But I'm looking for my best lineups that have minutes remaining, and I'm trying to see if I have a shot at the optimal. If I do, I want to try to play. Maybe I want to try to play a very chalky high floor guy. The obvious one would be like, let's say I have McCaffrey in my lineup, and I'm look through the leaderboard and I'm like have the highest score with 60 minutes remaining. I want to stand pat. The only reason I might not want to is the other thing you want to look at is the amount of people that have your same lineup. Like if so, in my case with the one win, I did have what looked like the optimal lineup, but there was like 40 people that had the same lineup and the same number of spots remaining. And I swapped off of Devontae Adams because he was the chalkiest player. So I think that's what you're looking for is most of the time you're going to say, oh, I don't have the optimal. I should probably swap to someone lower owned that leaves salary and at least give myself a chance to win, right? Versus if you do have the optimal, you probably want to, again, you have to decide, do I want to play the best lineup and risk some duplicates, or do I want to try to get unique?
Exactly, and
Did I
it's
miss anything in there?
no, I think that's for small for larger contests. That's the best way to do it. For smaller contests, it's a little easier to see where you stand and what other players have. You can do the math a little bit more quickly, and it's really just an ownership game at that point. If you're, let's say you have 120 player minutes remaining going into the last game, a couple guys above you have 180, 240. Maybe I need to make these 120 guys the lowest owned guys possible, right? Things like that of that nature, correlate a little more, whatever it may be. But really, again, you have multiple spots to do it after 12:30, after 4:30. Are you making many swaps before the 4:30 game? Right, not much has changed. Obviously, we have one full game of information into our lineups, but are you making much before 4:30?
No, probably not. It's really probably I'll probably look, but yeah, it's a little uncertain. You brought up a great point about correlation. I think in fact the one I had Devonte Adams and like two Panthers or something. It was Panthers Packers,
Yeah.
and I was making swaps, and I said, all right, let's play Aaron Jones and against a Carolina wide receiver, right? Aaron Jones scores touchdowns, they're winning, Carolina's trailing, and they throw, and then that's exactly what happened. So I think, especially if you're looking for more points correlating, whether it be defense, running back, wide receiver, that kind of thing is another great way to do it.
Absolutely. Somebody's asking us to make a FanDuel lineup. We will not do that. Sorry, Drew. One more thing I want to ask you. It just was enter my mind. Let me think about it. Oh, it was the positions that we use, right? Like you probably said, we probably don't want like three Packers receivers in the same lineup. What types of rules are you making for your 150? You don't have to go super deep here, but what kind of lineups are you ruling out based on the custom rules that you put in the builder?
I'll start with the one I always steal from you now, which is the max two quarterback, running backs, and opposing defense. Right. For people who aren't familiar, Brian came up with this, but essentially, like we said, you can play two running backs in the same team. You absolutely can stack a quarterback and a running back, but playing the quarterback and both running backs is just pretty thin, right? Because if the running backs are both optimal, they're probably stealing, points from the quarterback. And you can stack a defense against a quarterback, and you could even stack a quarterback and a pass catching running back against defense. But if you played all four in the same lineup, for example, it's just kind of thin. Two running backs against a defense. So if you kind of do all the math there, that's how you get to the max two. So I'll start with that one.
Especially on three gamer, by the way. Two gamer, I think you can allow it sometimes. Three gamer, definitely allow you put that rule in.
Yeah. One that we now have a much quicker feature for. You don't have to make rules, but the setting we have for max opponents versus a defense and against a quarterback. What's your approach on the three gamer for that? So that would be inside of game stacks, which is in the stack menu, right? And then outside is in the settings.
Let me see if I can do this. Hold tight, guys. Let me see if I can get this. Let me see. How's this look? This looks decent.
The right side's cut off. But if you scroll or zoom out, you should be fine.
All right, hold on here. Let me see if I can. So if I pull stacks up here, the stack menu, you can see max opponents versus team defense, allow DST versus quarterback, allow running back versus team DST. So these are rules that you were made, I think, last year, Jack, that were input into the builder. I would probably only put. Actually, you know what? I think you could do two players against team defense in a stack, like on FanDuel, right? Let's say you do Dak, Pollard, CD, Dallas defense, running back with, Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin. Seems weird, but I think you can do max two on some of these games.
Yeah, and again, if you think about it, right, if you're listening to this saying this is crazy, right? Defense gets a pick six, they're already almost immediately optimal, and then the other team is down and has to throw. So it's very it works in showdown, and it also works in these short slates. So that's the thinking. And like we said, Washington throws the ball a ton, so that's why that makes sense. What about outside of game stacks? Do you think would you allow two? And then I guess more generally, are you trying to force in a minimum amount of 49ers, Lions, or Cowboys, given that they are large favorites?
Not necessarily. I don't think I'm going to force it by any means. Just because if the scoring is concentrated, I wouldn't necessarily force it. As far as number of players against defense outside of game stacks, I think I would probably use two, right? Because like you said, and this is especially for MME, right? Like if the defense gets a pick six in the first quarter, that really doesn't impact the game flow of the game, right? If it's late, sure it does, but defense is so random as far as fantasy scoring that while it may not look sense on paper, we see it optimal all the time. So I would try not to really rule out very many positional players versus defense rules here. I'd probably set it a little higher and then go through if I see something like, oh, this looks kind of crazy. Maybe swap that off or something.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of times what we do is we just build and then we just look at the lineups.
Right.
I look at the highest, lowest projected, look at the lowest and most remaining salary. You just kind of flip through them and you'll find stuff that's like, you know what, that's crazy. Like that just doesn't make sense. But as we've learned, if you're in doubt, allow it on a short slate because inevitably you'll see it win and you'll go, I blocked that. So, I've done it. You've done it.
Yes. Yes, we have. So, all right, let's close it out here, Jack, and we'll talk about our favorite low-owned plays at each position on both sites. I'll talk DraftKings, you talk FanDuel, since that's what we're both more well-versed. Before we do that, you just saw the lineup builder on screen here, occupyfantasy.com/lineup builder. Jack literally created it with input from all of us, and it is a beauty, especially for a lot of sports, but especially on short slates with all the rules that you can use, as low as $11 per week. So make sure you check it out. Link is in the description below. Jack, let's start at quarterback. FanDuel, you go FanDuel, I'll go DraftKings. Favorite low-owned quarterback. Well, and by low-owned, let's go for quarterback, not necessarily, but running back, receiver, tight end. We'll go favorite sub 20% play and favorite sub 10% play. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, so quarterback, we're not going to get very much here. For me, it's obviously Jordan Love based on maybe not so obvious because how to, right? So, I mean, we're not going to have very differing answers here, but what are your thoughts at quarterback, favorite low owned?
Yeah, I think I was thinking Howell. I just think it's a little more predictable that they're going to throw the ball, but they're both great. They're clearly the best two, right? Gino's a little tougher, as we said. The favorites are chalky, so it's got to be them. Play, get both of them in lineups for sure.
Agree. Okay, at running back, I'm looking at DraftKings ownership. We have David Montgomery, Jameer Gibbs, and then complete drop off to the backups. So again, not much of a choice here. I'll go David Montgomery in this game script as my favorite sub 20% play. You give me your favorite sub 20%. We'll bounce back and forth, and I'll think of a sub 5% play, sub 10% play.
I think I'm going to copy you and just say Montgomery, like you said. It's a little thin with the we got the 40+% guys, but I think we talked about this for folks who might have joined late. Detroit's a heavy favorite. Green Bay can't stop the run, but Detroit's splitting carries and their running backs are priced up. So especially on FanDuel, so they're going to be too low owned for their spot. They both have huge upside. They both get red zone. They both catch passes. And actually, I'll defer for 1 second. Someone asked about showdown. As I think about this, that is a very obvious showdown angle. Is just playing those running backs at captain MVP
True.
because the field's probably not going to do it because they're going to say, oh, they're splitting carries. I'm going to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, right?
Yeah.
Or Jared Goff. So, all right, kick it back over to you. Trash running back.
I will say whoever's the running back two for Dallas. And again, we haven't seen the transactions or the news since like 3 p.m. Eastern. So if Dowdle plays, I'll go Dowdle. If they activate Malik Davis from the practice squad or elevate him, I'll say Malik Davis. Davis especially will be like 0.5%. Dowdle will catch a little bit of ownership if he plays, but that seems like an obvious spot to me.
Yeah. Who is the Green Bay running back? Is he even on the FanDuel slate? Who's the backup?
They added Patrick Taylor to the DraftKings slate. I am not sure if they added him to FanDuel. Let me pull up FanDuel. Let me see.
I don't. He's not in. He's not in the builder, but I was gonna see if
He's not on
on
the slate.
FanDuel. He's not on it. Okay, damn, that was gonna be my pick.
Here's the go. I'll say Patrick Taylor on DraftKings, and you can get Dallas back up
Okay,
running back.
let's do that. I'll take Dallas running back. Yeah, I think those are good ones. Other one, Jaden Reed got some handoffs. If Dylan is sucking and Dylan's kind of banged up, any chance Jaden Reed just kind of gets more of a featured role? Period. Running back, catching, all the above in this game script and with the running back situation.
Absolutely, he's questionable with the chest injury. I think he's going to play, but let's monitor that just in case. But
Yeah.
very glowing remarks about both Reed and Dontavian Wicks, who is again out if you missed the top of the show, from their head coach Matt LaFleur. And again, just they haven't been that impressed with Watson and Dobbs. Reed is a guy I think that will accelerate in the second half of the season, and why not now here on the 3-game slate? I agree with you there. When they're banged up with injuries, why not go to a guy that's actually been making plays? So and we have all Green Bay receivers under 20%, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So that is an easy sub 20% wide receiver play. Let me go back to DraftKings. I'll give you Jaden Reed for FanDuel sub 20%. For me, sub 20%, I will say. I mean, it's tough not to pick all the Green Bay receivers. I will say. I mean, I guess I'll go Christian Watson or Romeo Dobbs, but I'll actually say I'll go Smith and Jigba, right? Both Seattle receivers have been banged up a little bit here and there. I think they're fine, right? But Smith and Jigba has started to finally see targets downfield. I want to say he had 4 last week, 15 or more air yards. A guy no one's going to play, right, as the wide receiver 3 on one of the worst team totals. So I'll say Smith and Jigba is my favorite sub 20%.
All right, now I'm playing trash.
Now you're playing trash.
Good news, guys, is that running back and quarterback are thin for low own, but receiver is not. There are lots of options here. I'm gonna go Jahan Dotson, 4%. They're gonna, like we said, they're gonna throw the ball. Dallas is a pretty aggressive defense, and they can give up big plays. And Dotson's target share is not quite elite leading, but I mean he's got his last 5 games 8, 10, 8, and 2 and 4. So he's got massive upside in a game they're going to be losing. We have him at 4% owned, so that's an easy one to me.
That is super easy. I like the Detroit wide receiver situation as well. For this is regular trash. I have an ultra trash play in a second, but for your 20 max trash, appropriately branded 20 max trash, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, and depending on where Jameson Williams ends up, but they're cannibalizing enough that no one is going to want to play a ton of either of them. So I think that group is another one in particular that makes a ton of sense. Jameson's going to be above the 10% mark, but Reynolds we have at 4% and Raymond we have at 0%. Reynolds 25 or 27 routes last week. Reynolds is going to get in that 10 plus range. That's kind of the range you're looking for if they get at least 10 routes in the previous weeks. So I like Raymond, and I like drawing up shot plays for him as well and getting the ball in his hands. Ultra trash is Malik Heath, wide receiver 4 for Green Bay. Again, if they were willing to put Dontavian Wicks out there and really limit the snaps and opportunities a little bit of Dobbs and Watson, why wouldn't they do it with the next guy up and Malik Heath? 0% owned. 150 max play only in game stacks. But wide receiver 4 for Green Bay is a spot, whoever that may be.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know that I have another one, but
I think that's
yeah,
fair.
I don't want to. That's a good one. That's a good one. Tight end.
Tight end.
Um,
Ooh, okay. Sub
you
20%.
go first.
All right, sub
I took
20%
a
on
read last time.
DraftKings. Let me see here. Pulling it up. Again, most of the guys are going to be over 20%. The only one we have under 20% that's actually starting and isn't bad is Jake Ferguson on DraftKings. We have Thomas, Kittle, Laporta, Kraft all over 20%. Ferguson 18, so by default, it's him. Is it different on FanDuel? I haven't looked too much.
No, it's the same. We gotta adjust Kraft for Musgrave being out,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, and that Ferguson seems like a good play. I mean, his price is fine. He gets the ball. Probably shouldn't be that low. Yeah. All right, the fun ultra trash tight end.
Christ, man. Okay. Well, you already gave Schoonmaker, right? Schoonmaker, however you say his name.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I'll go John Bates for Washington, and maybe I saw his routes run last week, and I was taken aback. I thought maybe it's because of the Curtis Samuel ejection, but he ran like 20 something routes last week. I don't know why or how, and he's not that great of a player. But if you get 20 routes out of a guy, um, you know what? Actually, I just looked, and he's John Bates is $4,500. Oh, that's on FanDuel. Um,
Yeah, so he's minimum price.
yeah, I'll go John Bates.
One thing I was checking, Green Bay plays a lot of two tight end. Um, I mean, who's gonna play? Are they if they play any two tight end at all? I'm looking at this Ben Sims guy. Can he run? He looks.
I,
He ran a 4.5.
legitimately don't know anything about this guy. I mean, we played all these guys in preseason DFS. I have no idea who Ben Sims is. He's wearing a purple shirt
Yeah.
in his profile picture. He must have played for Minnesota at some point. I don't even remember playing him in preseason DFS, so that's a bad sign.
But the reason we bring this up, we're not really joking, is that tight end is like the most zero floor position there is, right? So if there's a spot where the chalk is most likely to fail, it's probably tight end.
True.
And so again, if you play a min price guy and you use all the salary, you might beat all the lineups that used 6,500 Sam Laporta if he only scores 7 points, and that allowed you to get in one extra stud that scored 25, right? So that's why we talk about these guys is they are viable. Again, 150 max only. It's not a main thing you want to do, but
I guarantee you, we are the only Thanksgiving show that ended our stream with a Ben Sims screenshot. So
please
you're
win with
welcome.
him so we can talk about it on Twitter later and
Yes.
post the snippet.
Yes, please, absolutely. So, all right, guys, this is a long video. We appreciate you watching as always. Our daily plug is already up for the Thanksgiving slate. We're going to go in and modify it a little bit based on the injury news we get later this evening. But we talked a lot here, right? But we did, and I say we, but Bismo, one of our showdown writers, condensed all the short slate strategy into a nice, easy to read section. If you play DraftKings, FanDuel, 3 different ways, different ideas, all the strategies we talked about here just condensed into an easy to read section. Go read the daily plug. Has rankings for each position. Has showdown tips as well. And a lot of you ask me about showdown. Talks about showdown there. Occupy models up and running. Ranks every player FanDuel and DraftKings. Jack and I are going to continue to tweak the projected ownership for both sites through the evening. I think that's it, Jack. You want to pitch the lineup builder just really quickly?
Yeah, lineup builder is designed for a lot of things, but very specific emphasis on these short slates. We put a lot of rules in to make it easy to build these kind of lineups. Whether you're building just one or 150, you can use it. If you're just building one, you can use the multi-builder, build a bunch of lineups, and use it as a way to start your process. And I know, Brian, you do this all the time, right? And I do it too. You can see what's highest projected. You can see the ownerships. And we have a single builder with some criteria in there. So if you're not using it, definitely get in there. This is a great contest type to get your feet wet.
Absolutely. And I will say this, right? We do have some members that sign up and say, where's the easy one-click button to make this work? On some slates, right? I would still never recommend this, right? But there are some sports, some slates where you can say, all right, thumbs up some guys, make a rule about ownership, build, take the top projected lineup. It's not great, right? But you can do that. For this slate in particular, you're going to need to make rules and you're going to need to get into it. So while, yes, the builder makes it all readily available for you, is not going to be very simple 2 clicks, right? So what I would suggest is go in tonight, make your rules, make some practice runs, make your stack rules, ownership rules, right? Sleep on it, wake up tomorrow morning. Again, it's all assuming you have time to do this, and then run your official lineups. That way, get your rules and stuff in tonight, and then you can go figure out which lineups you're going to run tomorrow. I think Jack, that's the best way to do it. Is you have to dedicate some time for these short slates.
Yeah, you absolutely do. It's rules are really important, or else you just end up with random junk that a lot of other people are playing. And we built the tool especially to make it easy for you to we built in a lot of those options as like checkboxes and things like that. But yep, you gotta spend time on it to make it good.
Absolutely. So, all right, you can find us in Discord, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. All the tools we talked about, occupyfantasy.com is a little as $7 per week. For Jack, I am Brian. Thank you for listening. We know a lot of you are busy around this time of the year, so it means a lot to us that you tune in and watch our videos during the holidays. So, thank you for that. And good luck to everyone out there on the Thanksgiving DFS slate.